we're going to look at the different ways drugs affect human behavior by seeing how they affect the brain. So we'll take each different drug, we'll talk about how it works and what it does and what kind of brain damage it causes, and then how that results in a different type of behavior for that individual. The first drugs that we'll look at are called psychostimulants. Methamphetamine and cocaine are two prime examples of these. We'll take a look at how they work on the brain and see where we can go from there with creating a model of human behavior that's demonstrated in what you see on the streets. We're going to start out with a review of the neurological pathways of the various psychostimulants here and see how they affect the brain. We'll start out by looking at neuronal architecture and then moving on to how it affects systems in the brain. Communication in the brain takes place first in the neuron, which synthesizes neurotransmitters, sends them out. They transmit chemicals in the synapse. We've seen this before. And then there are downrange things that happen, like genetic transcripts that change the nerve cell and rewire the brain. Dopamine and norepinephrine are the main neurotransmitters affected by the stimulants. For example, methamphetamine, activates dopamine going from the ventral tegmental area into the nucleus accumbens. It also innervates areas and excites areas in the amygdala, which is responsible for paranoid behavior. So we can see that a number of the different excitatory things that happen occur with dopamine and norepinephrine with the psychostimulants. In the case of the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, we can see that as it is overactivated, which is typical for stimulant abuse, we will see positive symptoms of psychosis. This is the manic, paranoid, more violent, more aggressive sorts of behavior that we see associated with methamphetamine, for example. Conversely, when the dopamine is not present, after the individual comes down from being high on methamphetamine, we'll see all the negative symptoms, the social withdrawal, anxiety, depression, feelings of terrible pain and suffering, and just a bad feeling that's called anhedonic feeling. Psychiatrist Daniel Amen has pioneered the use of imaging to look at the brain and see what's going on while people are under different states of influence. In the case of methamphetamine, we can see that the single photon emitting computerized tomography or SPECT scan sectors the brain, then it examines these by computer and reconstructs them into images that look like this. This is a healthy brain right here. You can also see a normal brain right on the left, and then a meth user's brain on the right. What you're seeing is a functional picture. You notice the prefrontal area is decreased, and also the sides of the brain, the temporal areas where the hippocampus and everything else that we've talked about are located. We can see another image of a SPECT scan of a normal brain on the left and abnormal on the right, and we can see the frontal and the hippocampal, temporal, amygdala damage on the image on the right. So anyway, we can see in these pictures how methamphetamine actually affects the brain, how it damages it. Now let's look at what it does to human behavior. When we look at the things that it affects in the brain here, we can see that methamphetamine activates the amygdala. It also causes positive symptoms of psychosis, and it deactivates the prefrontal area of the brain, which means we can't think or we can't control our impulses. So when you have one excitatory, can't control my emotions, I have psychosis, craving, impulsiveness, compulsiveness, drug seeking, rage, anger, violence. It's a very dangerous sort of brain that we've created here with methamphetamine. So drugs negatively affect the prefrontal cortical area of the brain. They affect memory and learning by changing the hippocampal activity and increasing that in the amygdala. That we see paranoia and habit learning. Motivation and drive are changed. We see loss of inhibitions and the inability to think very clearly, and we see reward reinforced. And this is a behavioral learning, so we get into addictive sorts of behavior between the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens, as we've seen. So this craving reward causes hypofrontality, which is a shutdown of the front part of the brain. Here we can see a diagram that shows a number of the operative circuits in the brain that we are using here to examine methamphetamine. The amygdala activates paranoia and emotional bonding to the experience. The ventral tegmental area releases dopamine into the nucleus accumbens, which sets up a reward. It also shuts down the frontal area. The hippocampus remembers these patterns and reemphasizes them. This is another way of understanding it. Dopamine travels to the nucleus accumbens and then goes into the substantia nigra, or the ventral tegmental areas, and causes all sorts of addiction, including drug addiction. And of sort, this is very strong with methamphetamine. The loss of the frontal lobe, we have problems representing, maintaining goals, problems allocating our attention and focusing and sustaining it, problems evaluating things and monitoring how we're doing, prioritizing things in our life, fitting in socially and modulating our behavior based on that, learning, verbal difficulties, and problem solving. So our whole life is messed up from this. So then we experience these different schizophrenic-like symptoms, delusions. Mostly it's a persecutory delusion. Someone's out to get me. Sometimes it's referential. We have different types of bizarreness. Sometimes people think that strangers have removed an organ, or somebody's put a thought in their head or taken a thought out, or there's someone controlling their movements or thoughts from afar. Then we'll end up with a lot of types of delusions that sometimes they're true. Sometimes people are under surveillance by the police. Sometimes we are being watched, but that's a common paranoid delusion that's associated with the malfunctioning of the systems of the brain that we've discussed. And then finally, disorganized thinking. We have forms of speech. People will slip off track from one topic to another. They'll answer questions not very well. They'll have oblique answers. They'll have word salad. They just talk. Same thing happens with their behavior. They have difficulties in performing instrumental activities of daily living related to independent living, preparing meals, managing money, shopping for groceries, personal items, performing those everyday things that we do. Here are some signs of meth use: restlessness, repetitive motion, fast heartbeat, high blood pressure, jumping from topic to topic, sweating. Look at the pupillary dilation there, anorexia. We can see some of these physical symptoms. Here's another of the pupillary dilation. We've seen this earlier in some of our shows. But we can see a normal brain on the left and a meth user's brain on the right. And these behaviors that I've showed you are some of the things that happen as a result of doing these kinds of drugs, which damage your brain. And it functionally looks like what's on the right side of the slide here. So this is basically what happens when you do methamphetamine. Cocaine is the other most powerful psychostimulant. It's actually more widely abused than methamphetamine. Has very, very similar effects on the brain. Causes activation of the dopaminergic areas. Causes the prefrontal area to become inactive. And the drug-seeking behavior and emotional parts of the brain begin to take over. Most of the time it's smoked nowadays. However, people still snort it occasionally. Sometimes they inject it. It activates the reward pathway, as you can see in the little magenta color here on the slide. And then it also activates the behavioral learning and habit formation and impulsive leading to compulsive behavior. Pretty much the pharmacology, cocaine is released from synaptic vesicles. Dopamine is released from synaptic vesicles. Binds, has an effect, stimulates the nerves downstream, and then is re-uptook back into the synaptic transmitter to be reused again. But cocaine blocks that transport. The cocaine molecules actually sit onto the receptor molecule here, and then you can see how they keep it from actually working. So the dopamine stays out in that space more often, and it continues to bind and have more effect on the downstream nerves. But as it does that, we see the G protein bind, and we also see cyclic adenosine monophosphate formed, which forms second messengers, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh messengers that cause genetic changes to the cell and increase activity associated with doing cocaine and wanting cocaine. So this cyclic adenosine monophosphate changes the cell by causing new receptor molecules, makes it faster when cocaine is present for that particular stimuli, and it also has the ability to kill off dendritic connections to other parts of the brain, mostly the prefrontal cortical area, and also the areas that control the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that then, when not checked and balanced, causes paranoia to emerge. PET scan here, we can see the left picture is taken from a normal person that's awake. This is showing glucose metabolism. The one on the right, you can see a person on cocaine has some areas of the brain that are working more, but mostly the brain is actually downgrading in the scan we have here. The brain's not working as well on cocaine. So while people think that they're brighter and faster and smarter, they're really not. They're just more into a rewarding experience. And then we can see a normal, these are PET scans, comparative, the normal one at the top, and then the downregulated brain functions 10 days after cocaine, and even 100 days later, the brain is still not fully recovered. So we see some very serious downregulation when people are not actually on cocaine. The effects of cocaine are pretty much exactly like we talked about with methamphetamine. We see a reduced activity in the frontal lobe, so people have less self-control, they're more impulsive initially, and then also more compulsive, which is just doing the same thing over and over without knowing why. They're more emotional, and they have a much higher chance of violent behavior. So brain damage is pretty much the same as it is with methamphetamine, with cocaine.